Well, this week we've talked about tremors. We've studied about tremors. Tremors, of course, are those ongoing slight adjustments in the earth core after an earthquake occurs. They are not violent, but it is the shifting and settling of the tectonic plates. It is, of course, where the very center of the earthquake happens. This friction is there, and we feel those slight adjustments yet in those core plates underneath the Earth's surface. That's the tremors. And of course, in our spiritual lives, the tremors that need to continue is that continuing shifting and settling of aligning God's value system with ours. Because we have, in many ways, adopted the world's value systems about stuff, about resources, material things, money. And so even though this was a quake, I hope, in your life, and there was very positive things that happened in you, the tremors that we want to see are the ongoing changes and subtle shiftings that need to take place in your life long term to let God continue to have His way in your heart and in your life in this whole area of generosity. There are 3 P's of giving that you have read about this week in your personal journal, and I just want to reflect on those a little bit because I think they're very powerful, especially when we think of long-term impact of quake. The first P is priority giving. And priority giving, again, simply means that you give God the first part. You've read verses this week about how God calls you to give the first part, and He promises to give you priority in His life when you give Him priority in yours. I'll never forget when Susan and I were in seminary. We were very poor. We had very little income. Susan was the only one who was working, and I was going to seminary at the time, of course. And I remember at one point in time, for 2 weeks, we ate chicken noodle soup. That's all we could afford. That is the only thing we had in the cabinets. And we ate our last chicken noodle soup the evening before. So the next morning, Susan went to work, and I went to seminary, came home at about noon. There was nothing for us to eat, and I just knew I needed to go on my knees and ask for God to provide. So I actually called Susan at her work, and I said, hey, honey, I just want you to know I'm going to just spend time today praying that God will provide for us. And so I began to pray. And I prayed for, I don't know how long, maybe an hour, something like that, just seeking the Lord and asking Him to provide, because Susan and I had committed to give God the first part of everything we owned. And this was sort of like this first great test in our lives as a couple. And even during this time when we had nothing, whenever we got something, we gave God the first portion, the first tenth of what we got. And so after praying, I got up, walked past the hallway that went to our front door, and noticed something slipped under the door. So I went over to the door, picked it up, and it was an envelope. And I opened the envelope, and inside the envelope was $60 cash. Now, $60 cash is what we spent every 2 weeks for food. This was in the early 80s, and I was just overwhelmed. And here's what's so amazing. Inside that envelope with the cash was a little note that said, we give this money to you because God has laid it on our hearts to do this for you, and we give it anonymously so God will get the glory. Now, we hadn't told anyone we were out of food. We told no one that we had this kind of situation going on, and yet God provided for our needs. And it was like God said, if you give me priority, it won't be easy, but I will provide for your every need. And God has never failed us. Susan and I have always practiced priority giving in our lives, and God has always blessed. So I challenge you to make priority giving a very important part of your life. Just live it. Just live it.